Hello, and welcome to the online version of the Spotted Bat Project volunteer training. My name is Sara Rose, and I am the volunteer coordinator for this project. Before we get started, I just want to thank you for taking the time to complete this training. Normally, we would go out and listen for spotted bats in person, but for now, we are moving forward as best we can. This is a relatively new project, and we are really excited to expand our efforts and recruit some awesome new volunteers. The Spotted Bat Project is carried out by the Northwestern Bat Hub. The Northwest Bat Hub is a part of the Humans and Ecosystems Resiliency and Sustainability Lab, also known as the HERS Lab, at Oregon State University, Cascades. This project is the Northwest Bat Hub's only current citizen science project. Here at the Bat Hub, most of our work involves coordinating, facilitating, and conducting bat monitoring and research, along with agency partners, both federal and state, along with a few nonprofits. Now, bats can be fairly difficult to study, especially on a regional scale. And the reason for that boils down to a few things, but one of the primary ones is actually just their basic biology. So we're going to cover that just a little bit so everyone can be well informed when they're out there volunteering and listening for these little fuzzy flying animals. Now, because they are small and fuzzy, people tend to assume that they are rodents, but they are, in fact, not rodents. They belong to a group called Chiroptera. And Chiroptera is a Latin term which roughly translates to handwing, which is actually visible if you look right here. These little nubs at the tops of the wings are the bat's thumbs, and then these bones that come down are their finger bones. Bats essentially fly with the power of jazz hands, which is pretty amazing. It's very different than how birds fly. It does also contribute to why sometimes they look a little spazzy or herky-jerky when they're out catching insects. They're very dexterous. Their wings are just as flexible as your hands. Now, if you have been out and about in Central Oregon and you've seen bats either flying around or perhaps in a cave or a lava tube, they may have all looked the same to you. Small, dark, fuzzy, and a little bit nondescript. But bats are actually a highly diverse group. There are more than 1,400 species of bats in the world and about 15 here in the Pacific Northwest, including the little brown bat, the pallid bat, the canyon bat right here, and then the subject of this project, the spotted bat. One thing that all of our bats here in North America have in common is echolocation. Echolocation is the process by which bats emit these high-frequency sounds that travel out and bounce off of objects. Now, when those sounds bounce off of objects, they change shape depending on that object's size, texture, shape, and how it's moving. The bat can then interpret these changed sound waves and essentially see those objects with its ears very quickly as it flies. And this is how bats navigate the dark night sky. Now, that's not to say it's the only way that they maneuver in their surroundings. You've all probably heard the term blind as a bat, but it is entirely misleading. Bats do have relatively good eyesight, and when there is light, they do also use their eyes to navigate. Now, echolocation is the one thing that actually makes it easier for us to study bats. Those high frequency calls can be recorded, and they are a little bit different for each species of bat. So we use a system like the one that you see here in this image. At the top, we have a microphone, and it is attached to this 10-foot pole. What you can't see is a little device that's also attached called a bat detector. And these specialized microphones and detectors can record those high-frequency echolocation calls. When we bring them back to the office, a combination of specialized software and specially trained humans can parse out those sounds to understand which species of bat made those echolocation calls. And that's how we map bat populations in North America. There's a national standardized method for doing this, and it is one of the biggest projects that we are involved with here at the Bat Hub. It's called the North American Bat Monitoring Program, and it was developed as a response to white nose syndrome, which is a fungal infection that spread across the eastern US, really damaging bat populations there. We have had a few cases here in the western US. Luckily, it hasn't been as widespread or devastating at this point, but we don't know what the future holds. So it's really important for us to understand where our bat species are and how their populations are responding to different pressures, such as white nose syndrome. But enough generalities, let's get into some more specifics. The subject of this project. Spotted bats are very distinguishable from other bats if you can get reasonably close to them, which is not an easy thing to do. They are a kind of vesper bat. The term vesper comes from a Latin word for evening, and the original term describing this group of bats translates roughly to evening birds. They are identifiable by their relatively simple noses, at least simple by bat standards, their enormous pink ears, and then their bright white bellies. On the flip side, we have the most distinctive feature, those 3 white spots, 1 on the rump, 2 on the shoulders. And then we also have this kind of uniquely long tail, which is connected to their back legs by a flap of skin called the patagium, and that aids in flight. This is a map of the spotted bat's expected range. As you can see, it's large and concentrated in the more arid parts of North America. This map is very generalized and is based on what we know about spotted bats' preferences, but we don't actually have confirmation for a lot of these areas. This is a map of the areas where we and our partners have conducted bat monitoring in Oregon. Each purple square represents a 10 by 10 kilometer area in which 4 microphones were set up to listen for bats. The dark blue squares are the areas where our detectors actually recorded spotted bats. As you can see, there's a huge difference in where we expect to find spotted bats and where we are actually recording them. We do have anecdotal evidence, however, that there are more spotted bats in central and eastern Oregon than our recordings would indicate. But why is this happening? One reason might be their habit of flying and roosting higher than other bats. They sleep in crevices along high cliffs and feed on large, relatively high-flying moths. It is possible that the height at which they fly is impeding our microphone's ability to detect their calls. But spotted bats are unusual in another way. Their echolocation calls are a significantly lower frequency than other bats. They are actually audible and distinguishable by the human ear. So now I'm going to play a few different bat calls for you, just to show you the difference. This first one up here is the call of a myotis, which is one of those relatively nondescript, small brown fuzzy bats. There are a few species of myotis here in Oregon, and the call that I'm about to play for you is not what it would sound like if you were out in the field listening to bats. If a myotis flew past you, you may not hear anything at all. You may hear a nondescript clicking noise. But when we drop the frequency and slow it down a little bit, this is what it sounds like. Now, as you can see, there's a second call here. These are some really short, little truncated blips, and they are within the range of human hearing. This is a spotted bat call, and the clip that I'm about to play for you has not had the frequency lowered. It's not been altered in any way. If a spotted bat flies past you, this is roughly what it's going to sound like. Very different, right? I'm going to play it one more time just so that you can start to really get the sound locked into your brain. We are going to play a few more calls that are slightly different throughout the presentation, so don't worry. You'll have plenty of chances to listen to these calls. So your participation in this project is broken down into 3 steps. The first one is training, which is what we're doing right now. I also encourage you guys to listen to recordings of spotted bat calls. I'm going to try to make a few available on our website and Facebook and all the different pages that we have going right now. After this training, there is going to be a short quiz. Don't worry, it's not difficult. It's just to make sure you know what a spotted bat actually sounds like, since we can't go out and train together in the field and listen. And 2, just that you know how to stay safe and what our safety procedures are. After you've completed your quiz, we move on to site selection. So this is actually a relatively big project. We have 120 different survey sites for folks to choose from. So we have made an interactive map that will let you pick which sites you want to survey based on how much you want to hike, how far you want to drive, those sorts of things. And we're going to go into that in great detail in just a little bit. Then we have data collection, and this is the fun part. This is when you get to go out and listen for bats and record when you hear them. So once you've completed your training and your quiz, we're going to send you an invitation to join our SitSci project. SitSci is a platform that was developed specifically for Citizen Science Project, and it has 2 main components. One is the website, and this is going to have a whole bunch of resources for you, maps, links, videos. You can look at the data that's being submitted. It's pretty cool. And then there's also an app. You'll actually be using the SitSci app to fill out your data sheets and submit your data. So for choosing your sites, it can be a little bit difficult. So we are going to walk you through this process. All right, so this is the Spotted Bat Project volunteer sign up. It's through a platform called ArcGIS Online. And we have a little panel right here which has instructions on how to use this, but I'm not going to run through all of that word for word right now because I'm going to show you instead. Right up here, we have our legend, which should help you kind of figure out where you want to do your surveys. So as we can see here, these squares are what we call sample units. So these are 10 by 10 kilometer areas, and they are each divided up into 4 quadrants. And in a perfect world, each of those quadrants would be surveyed once a month in June, July, and August. Now you may notice that there are 2 different colors here, green and yellow. The green represents sample units that are primarily public land and include public roads. So they are what we consider to be volunteer friendly. The yellow ones are either not public land or don't have public roads that have access to that public land. So if you know of a place within one of those yellow sample units that say you know someone who owns some land there, or you've been out there before and you know that there's no access issue, please let us know so that we can make sure that everything is on the up and up before volunteers head out that way. Then we have these green survey points. And right now they're all green because they are all available for you to sign up for. Once people have signed up for the surveys for those locations in June, July, and August, those survey points will turn red. So you know that those do not need to be surveyed anymore. We then move on to our center panel right here. This is our layer list. So this map is editable. You can go in and turn layers on or off depending on what you need to see. Different layers will be available at different depending on how far you zoom in. So I zoomed in far enough, and now these trails and Forest Service roads have popped up. But if for some reason you don't want to look at trails or Forest Service roads, you can just take those right off. Pretty simple. You can also look at a nice public lands layer. Ooh, it's all Forest Service. Beautiful. So however you want to look at the map, it is up to you. Then we go right here and we have our base map gallery. Every time you come look at this website, it's going to at first look like this, and this is the satellite imagery. But if you wanted to change it up and say, I like the navigation map, mostly because it kind of gives me a bit better perspective on where things are relative to different cities or landmarks. So I like to use this sometimes, and I kind of switch back and forth between them. As you can see, it's relatively easy to do that. Imagery with labels is good as well. Then we go to this panel right here, and this is our editing panel. And every time you click on this, you're going to get this little notification. You can ignore it. We have made some of these things. We've given you permission to create or modify the parts of this map that you need to. And that brings us to signing up. So if you've looked at the map a little bit and you say, hey, this spot looks really cool, and click on it here. Each site is going to have a site name, which I tried to make as memorable as possible. Then it's going to have something called a detection target. The detection target is the feature in the local habitat that we think is the likeliest to draw spotted bats to that area. We're going to go over these in more detail, but water sources, cliffs, and open space are kind of the priorities there. Then we have some notes. Not every site has notes, just whatever we think might be pertinent. For example, this one will require backpacking. As you can see here in the hiking difficulty section, it's going to be more than 5 miles each way. Since surveys take place in the evening, we don't want folks hiking more than 5 miles in complete darkness. So this one does require camping out near the survey site. It will tell you who owns the land, so you want to make sure you're going to somewhere with public land. And to the best of my abilities, I have put information on here on how I think the roads getting to either the site or the trailhead are going to be. These are all just kind of my best guesses based on looking at the maps. I have certainly not been to all 120 of these sites. In fact, I've been to almost none of them at this point. So just take the driving and hiking difficulty with a grain of salt. But let's say everything looks good. You know you can get to this location, you want a backpack, and you want to do it in June. You're just going to click right here and type in your name, first and last if you don't mind, or first name, last initial, vice versa, just so I know exactly who plans on surveying the site. Then you're just going to click somewhere else and hit save, and then close. And now when you click on it again, your name will be there, and other folks will know that the survey for June for that location is covered. But I do not plan on backpacking to that location in June, so I'm going to go ahead and erase my name and hit save. I'm going to close out. So just a few other little things to think about here. We have a variety of different kinds of sites. These sample units are essentially randomly generated. We didn't pick them based on where we thought the spotted bats will be. So some of your surveys, unfortunately, will be fruitless, but any good scientist knows that no data is still good data. Not getting spotted bat calls tells us just as much as getting spotted bat calls. And there is going to be a range of kind of difficulty and outdoorsiness. For example, if we zoom in here, this sample unit overlaps the city of Redmond. These 2 points are within the canyon that runs through Redmond, and that is basically one giant park. This one is just along a canal pretty shortly off of Airport Road, as is this one right here. So there are some that are going to be really easily accessible and some that are going to be way out there. So you just want to choose a site that makes the most sense for you. Now, if you find this map overwhelming, or if you're just really unsure about where you think you should go, please feel free to reach out to me and I can work with you and pick out some sites that I think would work best for you. Everyone has different vehicles with different clearance levels and different hiking abilities and different hiking desires. Like some of us can hike 7 or 8 miles in a day, but don't really want to. So it's just all about what makes you comfortable and happy while you are doing this work. And finally, we have this, and it's not going to show anything right now, but as people start to report their surveys, this will pop up. We have a goal this year of 25 surveys per month. So fingers are crossed on that. Fingers are crossed that we can even send people out all summer. But as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of playing it by ear right now. But if you want to, in June, start looking at that, should be fun to keep track of. All right, now the fun part, going out and listening for bats. We're going to go through the whole process, but the actual survey is fairly simple. You're going to go out to your survey site. You're going to get there before sunset. You're going to listen for bat calls for 1 hour, starting at the end of civil twilight, which we're going to go over in just a moment. But first, I'm going to take time to listen to another spotted bat call. So you may notice that these are really short, clipped chirping sounds. They're very distinct. It can be a little confusing to distinguish a bat call from cricket calls, and we will play some bat calls kind of overlaid with cricket sounds. The way that I kind of keep them straight, to me, the bat calls are very discreet. It's an individual click. You know, they may be close together, but it's still very sharp sounding, whereas a cricket call can kind of trill or purr almost. They can kind of roll into one another. So that's kind of how I think about it. The more you listen to these calls, the more comfortable you'll get telling the difference between insect sounds and spotted bat sounds. But another way to know that it's a spotted bat is if it's very distinctly above you, because then it's more likely to be a bat than, say, a cricket. All right, so our survey method. Civil twilight. Daily light levels are divided up based on how far below the horizon the sun is. Our surveys start at the end of civil twilight, which is also the beginning of nautical twilight. And you can find this information for any location at timeanddate.com/sun. And this is what it looks like. It'll kind of show this interesting graphic. But what you're interested in is going to be right here. That is your end of civil twilight, or right up here, your beginning of nautical twilight. So on one of the longest days of the year, your survey won't start until about 9:30 p.m. So that's something to keep in mind when you are planning your surveys. These can go a little bit late in the middle of the summer. Now, a big part of this project is safety, so I'm going to spend quite a bit of time going over that. First part of safety is choosing where to go, which I did just cover in the online sign up page, but we're going to go over it again. Please do not overextend yourself. And remember that wherever you go, unless you're camping, you will have to hike out after dark. So you want to take a look at the terrain. I've looked at trail reviews and tried to update those categories as much as possible so that you can understand what you're getting yourself into. So just don't do anything beyond your personal comfort level. Unless we have an in-depth talk about it, I don't know what your limitations are. So just, it's important to know oneself in these instances. Next is weather. You're always going to want to check the weather before heading out. If rain, lightning, or other inclement weather is expected, you're going to want to reschedule your survey. It's no fun to be out sitting in the rain, getting cold at night, especially. Bats don't really like it either. They're small. When they get wet, they get a lot heavier. They're really light creatures. So once their fur gets wet, they almost double in weight, and it's not fun for them to fly around. And also, if it's raining hard or if it is especially windy, you probably won't be able to hear the bat calls anyways. So it's best to just choose to survey another night. Next is driving. So when choosing your sites, again, you're going to have some information about what the roads are going to be like, and it's important to, yes, know your vehicle's capabilities, but also just be cautious when you're out on some of these backcountry roads. You may not expect to find anyone else driving around in the forest late at night, but as someone who does field work for a living and is out in the forest late at night, there are sometimes quite a few other vehicles out there. So you just want to be cautious, especially around sharp turns. You want to watch for pedestrians and wildlife. And when it comes to parking, you want to try to be as careful as possible. It is always a good idea to have to walk a little bit further if it means you can park in a safer location. There are two big things you want to keep in mind. The first one is soft shoulders. I can tell you from personal experience that it not only takes a very, very long time to have your vehicle pulled, dragged back up a hill after sliding down a soft shoulder in the middle of the forest, but it's also very, very expensive. And that is a cost the lab will not incur. That will be on you. And then you also just don't want to block a narrow forest road. So just try to keep those things in mind when you're parking. Now, you want to always give yourself a bit of extra time to get to your survey site and take a good look around while it's still light out. As I discussed, spotted bats like really dramatic landscapes. They like those steep, rugged cliffs, deep canyons. So you want to be always sure to keep a distance from cliff edges, especially in the dark, and be cautious on steep slopes. When hiking to or from your site, try to walk without anything in your hands except maybe a walking stick or trekking poles. And this is especially important if you're going to be hiking in steep or rough terrain. You also want to make sure that you have adequate light sources. So everyone in your group should have their own headlamp and a set of backup batteries for that headlamp. As a group, you should also have at least one additional light source, a flashlight or lantern, something like that, just to be sure that no one is going to be left high and dry if something malfunctions while you're out there. Now, we do conduct these surveys during fire season. Most of you are Central Oregonians, so you understand what fire season looks like here. I will be checking local fire reports regularly, tracking both wildfires and prescribed burns. It will make sure all of you are aware of areas to avoid when necessary. However, it is important that you take personal precautions as well. Before you head out, check your survey site to make sure it will be accessible and safe. Many of you will be surveying in dry, grassy areas. The heat from the underside of a car can cause dry grass to catch on fire, and these fires can spread very quickly. In these dry grasslands, avoid driving over tall, dry grass and never park on it. Keep an eye out behind your vehicle to watch for smoke. And it's also not a bad idea to keep a fire extinguisher in your car. We always do when we're doing field work. It's just good practice in the high desert. Now, checking in and out is going to be a critical part of volunteer safety. We do this with our field crews. We all check in every single evening to make sure that the whole lab knows that we are safe and sound at the end of every day. When you've chosen a date for a night of surveying, let me know. It doesn't matter if it's a month away or a spontaneous trip. I want to know about it. And then before you drive to your location, shoot me a text or email with where you are going and when you expect to return home. If you're camping, I want to know that as well so that I don't have to worry about you until you plan on returning to your house. When you're back home, you're going to contact me again to let me know that you are safe. If I don't hear from you, I'm going to try to reach out. If I can't get a hold of you within a few hours of your scheduled return time, the Bat Hub team will take steps to find you, which may include contacting emergency services. You can think of me like your dog, constantly and slightly anxiously awaiting your return, or maybe more like your mom, who assumes something horrible has happened always. I don't want to act like an anxious mother, but I will when it comes to my volunteers. So just please keep the lines of communication open consistently. Now we're going to talk a little bit about navigation. A lot of you may have experience in the backcountry and you may have your preferred methods of finding specific sites and navigating, and that is totally fine. Use the tools that you are comfortable with. I'm going to go over two tools that we like to use here at the HERS lab, and those are Google Maps and Avenza. So for Google Maps, you have a few different options. On that ArcGIS online volunteer sign up, you can copy paste your coordinates directly into Google and then have them sent to your phone. And that's the way that I like to do it, just to make sure I avoid typos. But if you want, you can also just type them directly into your phone. That certainly works too. Either way, it's going to take you to this page right here. And when you're there, you're going to want to tap right there, and that's going to bring you to this middle screen where you will tap on those three dots in the upper right corner, and that'll give you the option to download your map offline. And then here we have what it looks like. You're going to adjust your map according to what area you think you'll need. You're only really going to want to use Google Maps for your driving directions, not your hiking trails. Their trail maps are not great, but their road maps are really excellent. So just try to focus on that and prioritize the roads as opposed to the trails. And then you just tap download and it'll be available in your Maps app until you delete it. For navigating in more remote areas and for hiking, we have custom maps for each site. You're going to go to the Spotted Bat project page on SitSci and click on the Resources tab. This is a zoomed in view. You'll just find your site map, select it, and download it. Fairly straightforward. You are going to be using these maps, they're all PDF maps, in an app called Avenza. And Avenza is free and you don't need any like account login or anything like that. It's fairly straightforward. And this is what it's going to look like when you first open it. And you're going to tap that plus sign. And that will give you the option to download or import a map. And then from there, from device storage, and you just have to find your downloads folder. It can take a little bit of digging. Right there. And then you just find your site map and open it up and it'll import it into the Avenza app. Once you have downloaded your map, you're going to have a few different options. Under the navigation tab, you can enter coordinates, although your location is going to be visible on that PDF map. So you can just drop a pin right on top of the little star that shows you your site and navigate to it. I also like to use the tracking feature. Once you start it, it'll follow you wherever you go. And I really like this for hiking because after dark, it can be harder to see landmarks or the trail. So you can just follow your own footsteps back out with the app, which is pretty nice. And then it'll also be reminding you where you parked your car, where you started your hike. So Avenza is really handy if you would like some more personalized instructions in how to use Avenza. Just again, reach out to me. We can do a one-on-one kind of Zoom session, or once social distancing lifts, we can get together in person and do a little practice navigation and all that fun stuff. Okay, we are going to take a quick break from all of this technology and listen to bats again. So I'm going to play two different recordings. Both of them include cricket sounds. One of them also includes a spotted bat, and one of them does not. I'm going to play both and kind of think about it while you listen, and then I'll play the one with the spotted bat call a second time. All right, did you catch which one had the spotted bat call in it? Just in case you didn't, I'm going to play it again. It was the first one. So as I hope you can hear, the spotted bat call was that sharper sound. It started out a little quiet, but it got louder as the spotted bat flew closer to the person operating the camera. And I hope the difference was noticeable, but if not, there's going to be a link to that particular sound file, so you guys will be able to listen to that a few times and see if you can start to pick out that sharper, more clicky kind of sound. All right, we dive back into the technology. So I mentioned before that the SitSci is the platform that we're using for our data collection, and this is what the app will look like when you first downloaded it. It is a free app, so no need to worry about that. And you'll already have your username and password, so you're just going to tap sign in, and after you sign in, you're going to be prompted to allow access, which you will need to do. And then here is your homepage. If the Spotted Bat project and the Spotted Bat datasheet don't automatically populate, you're just going to click the arrows right here to fill those in. And once they're there, you just tap Add Observation. Your first tab is your main tab. It's the kind of basic information about where you are and what you're doing. You are going to fill out the date and the search time. The search time is almost always going to be 60 minutes. The only time it's not going to be 60 minutes is if you have to leave early for some reason, which is understandable. Things come up. So you'll just want to indicate that there. In the comments section, we would like you to put anything you find would be useful for future volunteers to know about the location, either navigating there or what the conditions are like once you get there. If you showed up and there was supposed to be a pond there and you didn't see a pond, note that. Just anything you think might be useful. Under name, you're going to put whoever is actually filling out the data sheet. And then for latitude and longitude, you're going to just click the Get Current Location button, and that will auto-populate your coordinates. Then you're going to mosey on over to, oh, hold on. I almost forgot. You're going to want to take a photo of the detection target. So the pond, the cliff, whatever it is, whatever angle you can get is okay, but as much of it in the photo as possible. And then we would also really love it if you guys would take pictures of yourselves all set up and ready to listen for bats. We don't get to hang out with our volunteers all that often, especially this year. So we want to see what you guys are up to and how much fun you're having. Then we have the site data tab. At the top here, you're going to see, well, right now you see location name and location ID. you're only going to see location name, and that is that site name that you saw on the ArcGIS sign up page. After that, you'll put observer names. For the observer names, you're only going to want to put people that are with you that are trained spotted bat volunteers. If you want to bring out your kids or a friend or whoever, but they're not trained, by all means, bring them with you. But please don't put their name down. And if they hear a bat that you don't record it, just because we can't be sure that they know what a spotted bat sounds like. And if they're really itching to help you with this, then just make them sit through the training and take the little quiz, and they will be a certified spotted bat volunteer, and they can help you out as much as they want. Then we have our start time and end time. So start time is going to be the end of civil twilight, and end time is going to be 60 minutes later, unless, again, you have to leave early. We would like this information in military time. Then you're going to have your detection target. Those were indicated on those sign-up sheets again, and it's just a little drop down, and you just pick whichever one is most applicable to that site. Once you are all squared away and ready to listen for bats, you're going to mosey on over to the species tab. This is what that looks like. It's relatively simple. You're going to record the time every time you hear a spotted bat. There is a section for notes or comments. If something strange happens, let us know, but otherwise, there's probably not a huge need for comments. You're also going to put number of individuals. Usually this will be 1. The rate at which spotted bats emit these clicks can be highly variable, so it's hard to tell if you're hearing 1 bat or more than 1. The only way you know for sure that you've heard more than 1 bat is if there's one very distinctly to the right of you at the same time that one is very distinctly to the left of you. That's the only time you're going to put more than 1. Otherwise, the sheet will generally look like this. And after you've filled it out, you're just going to want to tap report another. This little screen will duplicate and you will be ready to go when you hear another bat. After the end of your survey time, you're going to go ahead and hit save observation at the bottom. When you've returned home, you go back to that home screen and you just upload your data. It's very straightforward. We've tried to make it as easy on you all as possible. And ourselves, to be quite frank. All right, so detection targets. We're going to go over these in a little bit more detail for one particular reason. As I've mentioned, we have not been to all of these survey sites. We haven't been to most of them. So what information we have about them and how we chose them was based on what we could read on the maps. A lot of times, things look a little different on the ground than they do in the aerial imagery that is from a few years ago. Ponds especially tend to disappear over time. So it's important that you all understand what habitat features are most important for attracting bats to a given area. If you get somewhere and like, hey, I'm supposed to be surveying a pond and there are no ponds here, it's good to know that you can go look for another feature on the habitat that you think will attract bats. We divide those features up into 3 categories for spotted bats. The first one is still water. Ponds, lakes, and wetlands are kind of some of the bigger attractants for spotted bats for 2 reasons. 1, they attract a lot of insects. And 2, bats drink primarily, or at least our bats, primarily drink while flying. So they swoop down and take a little sip of water. So it's really important that they have still water where they can do that because they don't want to get caught up in a wave from, say, a quickly moving river. Now, next for spotted bats are those cliffs and dramatic landscapes. So anything that looks rocky and slightly treacherous has the potential to be a home for spotted bats. So those are another good place to target if you're looking for a spot to survey. Then we have open space. Spotted bats are among the larger bats in Central Oregon, and as such, they need a little bit more room to fly. They really like to hunt along forest edges. So where a forest meets an ag field, or if you're in an area with a clear cut or a burn, those are great places to position yourselves. And then also meadows. Areas with lots of flowers have lots of insects and therefore may have lots of bats. Now, to just kind of regroup, I want you all to understand the scope of this project. We have those 30 sample units, those randomly chosen 10 by 10 kilometer plots of land, each divided up into 4 quadrants with 1 survey site each. That comes to 120 survey sites, which we would love to have each one surveyed each month in June, July, and August, which comes to a total of 360 surveys per summer. Now, we don't expect to achieve this summer. That is a lot. That would be a huge volunteer base. But if you know anyone who is interested in being outdoors and contributing to some science, or if they just love bats, or if they spend most of their summer camping in Central Oregon anyways, please have them reach out to us or direct them to this training session. We would love to have them come aboard. We are really hoping to expand this project in the coming years, and we can do that with your help. So I want to thank you again for joining us. I'm going to play a few more spotted bat calls quickly, and then we're going to call it a day. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Again, thank you for taking the time to participate. I have included my contact information in the video description. Please feel free to reach out with any comments, questions, or suggestions. I have also posted a link for that short quiz that I mentioned. I look forward to working with you, and hopefully we will be able to meet face-to-face soon.